Hey everybody, it's MJ here on Just Plain Fun, once again on YouTube, and this is going to be volume 2 of the stuff you should know, mostly about Stanley hand planes, and then we'll talk about some other tools and some other brands and some of the differences. And so again, volume 2, hopefully you've already watched volume 1. If you haven't, feel free to go back and watch it. If not, you don't have to watch them in any kind of order. We're going to start out talking about rabbet planes. So first up, this is my user number 78. I used to run a B casting number 78, and I ended up selling that one to Justin Spalding. So shout out Triune Blades if you happen to be watching. And I upgraded to this one mostly because of the V logo there, you know, keeping it consistent with the rest of my collection. But what I want to show you guys specifically, guys and gals that are watching, about the rabbet planes is these depth stops, which I have a few of these available. But if you look at it, hopefully you can see that that ridge sticks up further, and of course it corresponds with that groove right there. And so on the 78, specifically the one made by Stanley, you're going to have that groove, and what I want you to remember is the groove is in front. And so I'm going to talk more about this here in a little bit, but here's a 192, and see the groove is in front. Here is a 180, and see the groove is in front. And the reason why I bring this up is because if you're shopping for a depth stop, I don't want you to accidentally get the wrong one. This is a Sargent made rabbet plane, so very, very similar design, but you notice that the groove is behind the screw. And so this is one, and Sargent was kind enough to mark them with 79, and you'll notice that the rib there is in the back. And so that corresponds right there. So again, I just don't want you to, you know, get the wrong one. I do have both of these available for sale for both the Sargent and for a Stanley. And by the way, Sargent also made these for Craftsman as well. So as a matter of fact, this one may very well be a Craftsman. It doesn't say Sargent anywhere on it, but it does have a Craftsman blade. That was what was in it when I got it. But just important to note there. And then on the fences, it's actually the same thing. So you got the 79 there, and on the Sargents or the Craftsman, you're going to see different attachment screws that will hold that rod in place, or hold it, the fence in place on the rod, I should say. Here's another design that you might, oops, that's the wrong one. Here's another design that you might see. See number 79 there. And then this one, I actually like this particular screw a lot better. I don't have as much faith in this one. It's just kind of dinky there. And the fences themselves, it's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes you can get these, you know, the non-Stanleys, if that's what you happen to have. Sometimes you can get these to slide over a certain models of the 78s, and then other times they won't. So as you can see, this one does not fit. It just won't slide over the bottom of that. Whereas the original, of course, naturally it does fit on there just fine, as long as the screw is backed off. And so you see what you got going on there. And then you can see that they put a groove there. They designed that fence to have that groove, and so that way it can ride below the blade when the blade is extended. And that is of note. We're going to talk more about the depth stops here in just a second on those. So on the topic of the depth stops, I don't know of a type study. I'm sure there's probably one out there on the 78s. I'm not familiar with it, but I just want to show y'all on the later 78s. If you look really close, you can see that it's got this cutout there for the blade, and that is because, or at least partially because, the blade on the 78 is actually slightly wider than the body itself, and that's because you want that blade to sit a little proud. Patrick Leach actually talks about this in Blood and Gore, and I invite everybody to go and check it out. But you want that blade to sit a little bit proud, because that's important when you're actually employing the plane. But the older depth stops, you can see, did not have that cutout, didn't have that groove. So just something to think about. Of course, I mean, if you had an older one and you were so inclined and you weren't worried about, you know, altering a vintage tool, you could actually, you know, file that groove there. But just know that that is, you know, remember that we're talking about stuff you should know. This is an original screw right here that goes with this depth stop, and Of course, this YouTube channel is not monetized yet. I'm not making any money on this, so forgive me for constantly advertising and talking about things that I have for sale. But I do sell these little aftermarket screws right here. You can also find these on eBay. I buy them in bulk on eBay so that I can sell them with depth stops at a cheaper rate. So, but you can find them on eBay, or you can buy one from me. And they are quite a bit cheaper. As a matter of fact, you're looking at $8 for this. And of course, it's best if you buy it with something else so that you're combining the shipping. And then I do have a couple of these original screws available as well. This one's not for sale, of course, that's for my user. And speaking of the Sergeants, you know, we talked about the 79s, the Sergeants, the Craftsmans. I actually like this particular style of spur better. Of course, I'm not going to switch and use a Craftsman or a Sergeant rabbet plane, but I do like this style of spur better than the one that's on the Stanley. This isn't supposed to be a rabbit video. It's just supposed to be, you know, stuff you should know. I'm going to cover a few different things. But as a side note, this particular plane, this particular body will take a Stanley screw, which is very odd to me because a lot of times they would use a different thread pattern. But there are all sorts of anomalies between Miller's Falls, Sargent, Stanley, you know, different eras, different vintages. They would have used and could have used a different thread pattern. And so sometimes, and as a matter of fact, for the fences, this Craftsman or Sargent, well, Sargent built will not take, it's a different thread pattern for the fence rod. And so that's important to note as well. But basically, when you're shopping for these parts, you know, just let me know what you have. I'm always going to ask you, or at least I'm always going to try to remember to ask you to send me pictures of what you've got so that I can try to match it, because that's very important. The last thing we want to do is send you stuff and then it doesn't fit. And as a matter of fact, the early Sergeants, I learned this one the hard way. Me and Douglas Joe figured it out, that the early Sergeants actually had the groove in front of the screw, like you see on a Stanley. And so fortunately we were exchanging some other stuff, and so I didn't lose out on shipping. But just know, you know, these rabbet planes have a lot of anomalies, a lot of differences. But if you need parts for them, by all means, let me know, and I'm going to do my best to get you hooked up. And a couple more things for stuff you should know on rabbet planes. Just in case you didn't know, you can install the fence. Because I know I have a lot of beginners, a lot of new folks that watch these videos. You can actually install the fence on either side of the rabbet plane. So especially if you were, say, left-handed, or if you were doing a rabbet on one end of the board and then doing it on the other, it might feel more comfortable for you, or depending on the grain, the orientation of the grain, it might be easier for you. Any number of different variables there, but you can install that fence on either side of the rabbet plane of the 78. Of course, your depth stop might get in the way. It just depends on, you know, if you're counting on the depth stop or if you're using some other method for ensuring the depth of your cut doesn't go too deep. And then while we're talking about it, this spur right here, more stuff you should know. That spur is identical to what's on the number 45s, on the number 45 combination plane. The spur is identical. The screw is not. The screw on the 78s they're actually, screws rather, are actually longer than the 45. So you can swap the spurs out in between them. You cannot swap the screws. And then speaking of spurs, this is another thing that's straight out of Blood and Gore. Patrick Leach talks about it. So this is a 180 and a 190, both rabbet planes that Stanley offered. These do not have fences, so these are just standalone rabbet planes. I would imagine that they were probably cheaper, and as a matter of fact, you can see they're not the duplex style, so they don't have the two different places where you can put the blade. It's just got the single orientation, or the single location there. The only difference between the 190 and the 180, I'm sure you spotted it already, is the 190 has a spur and the 180 does not. So that's the only difference. The 180s, as you'll read in Blood and Gore, actually were not made for too terribly long, and then they just, you know, fell out of favor. Probably didn't sell as well because folks that are cutting rabbets like to have a spur to, you know, you can break the fibers, cut the fibers prior to cutting their rabbet. And the same thing applies for the, you know, 191s, 192s, as I understand it. So as a matter of fact, here's the 192 here. You can see it's got a little different style of lever cap there. And then the reason why I had this 192 out is because I wanted to tell y'all that the depth stop there is identical among all of these. So the 78, the 190, 191, 192, all that, the 180 series, the depth stop is the same. And so you can interchange those if you need one, or maybe you have more than one rabbet plane and you don't necessarily want to spend the money. You can swap the depth stop between the two, and that spur is the same as well. The blades, of course, are different because they're different widths on the blades, but just know that the depth stops will fit any of them. Same thing with the depth stop screw. All right, the next plane that I want to talk about is the 140. If you're fortunate enough to own one of these little block planes, you're probably pretty happy about that because they are pretty cool. It's a skewed iron, which can be helpful in a lot of applications. And then it's got this removable side plate so that you can actually do, you know, rabbeting style work is what I'm going to call it. But, you know, easy peasy. You can put the blade all the way up against the edge, and then you can, of course, employ the plane accordingly. So what's cool about, there was a lot of things cool about these. There's a lot of things that are unique about the 140 and unique to the 140. So it's got a different iron, of course, because it is skewed. And I do have a handful of these. So if you happen to need an iron for a 140, by all means, let me know. And then this adjuster is mostly unique to the 140, especially the fact that it's angled like that. So it angles down. So that is unique on the 140. And then, of course, the removable side plate, you know, are already aware of that. But one of the other reasons why I want to talk about the 140 is because Mike Muscat was kind enough to build some of these aftermarket plates. These are one of the most common parts to be missing from a 140. And so if you follow me on Facebook on the Just Plain Fun, the parts division, you already know that these are available. You know, they run $35 a piece, which is a third of what the new ones cost, or the originals, I should say. The original ones cost on eBay. And then keeping in that vein where we were talking about the Sargents, you know, versus the Stanleys when we were talking about the rabbet planes, this is a Miller's Falls offering right here, and you can see the most obvious difference is the adjuster on there. So that's a Miller's Falls style. I do have a couple of those as well, but just know that when you see them out there in the wild, you know, just know your difference between your Stanleys and then your Miller's Falls on that. And I did cover this in a previous video. As a matter of fact, I think it was the Other Stuff You Should Know video. But I like to, you know, talk about suitable substitutes. But this screw right here is very, very commonly bent. And I think it's because of the way that we woodworkers employ the plane and the way that we adjust things. It's pretty common for this thing to be bent, but just know that it's the same screw, virtually the same screw. I think some models are identical to the number 78 and then a number of the other rabbet planes. So if you have a bent screw and you have a, you know, parts plane number 78, you can snag one of the screws off of it and put it on your 140 if you want to have a nice straight screw. And then I do have some original rosewood knobs available, so hit me up if you need one. And then I also have some aftermarket ones that my buddy Mark here was kind enough, I think I mentioned this in another video or at least on Facebook, but just know that I do have some available. And so if you happen to need one, you know where to go. Something else that I want to do is I want to introduce y'all to possibly a new tool that you might not be familiar with, especially the beginners. This right here is a number 67 Universal Spokeshave, and I am a huge fan of this Spokeshave. I think it is the best Spokeshave in the game. I really, really like it, and so that's why I'm plugging it. I've already got a complete one, so I don't have to worry about competing with y'all. For those of you that might be in the market or still be in the market, unfortunately, I don't have... Well, actually, I don't have any parts for these available right now, and they can be pricey when you see them on eBay. But one of the many things I like about it is you can remove this handle and you can actually install it up here as part of the universal, you know, feature or function of this. It's a pretty Spokeshave. It's got the nice rosewood there, but you can do that, and then the blade, you know, we're keeping with our theme of talking about, you know, rabbeting style work where the blade runs right up to the edge. And so you can actually employ the Spokeshave like so and do work like that, or get into a tight spot, you know, wherever the case. And as a matter of fact, it's even got this nice handy dandy fence there that you can install. And so, you know, much like the fence on a 78, you can adjust that you know, tighten down that screw, of course, and then set the depth of it. So I don't use this for rabbeting a whole lot, but it is just, you know, it's nice to have that option. What I really like about it, among many other things, is it has this adjustable sole, shoe, you know, whatever you want to call it. So this one is rounded right here. Let me show you a better angle. This one's rounded right here. And then you can remove that and you can put on this flat one. So depending on the application, depending on how you're using it or what you're using it for, will determine which soles you put on there. So again, Universal Spokeshave has a lot of different options, you know, a lot of different things that you can do with this. You can see that I've got this one sharpened with, you know, almost kind of a, you know, little camber on there, you know, knock down the edges, but it does a pretty good job and I like it. I don't know if I should even actually show this because, excuse me, my kids watch these videos sometimes, and if they see this, they're gonna start reminding me that I haven't finished this for them. But they have this, had this well-loved sword that they got in Yorktown, you know, because this is where the revolution was won, in case you didn't know. And I'd already repaired it once, but they managed to unfortunately break it again because it turns out wooden swords aren't that great. But I used this Spokeshave, that's why I bring it up, because I used this number 67 to recreate, and I, you know, beefed it up a little bit, but I did all the shaping on this sword, this new replacement one. Of course, out of walnut because it's prettier. But I used that Spokeshave to do all that shaping on there, and so you can see, you know, it's a pretty legit tool. And I don't know why I'm even plugging it, but it's just stuff you should know. The number 67 is the best Spokeshave in the game. We're going to change gears here a little bit and talk about the number 80 scraper or cabinet scraper. I like to show off my tools, I don't know why, but this is my user number 80 right here. And as you can see through that muck there is a V logo. And I was actually just using this here recently. If you follow me on Facebook, you know that I was using it on this little table that I'm making. But I have the original V logo blade that goes with it, but I don't like to use that much just because I don't want to put any more unnecessary wear on it. And so I threw a made in England blade, you know, new on shelf one that I picked up. I threw that in there, and that's what I used, just so I'm not wearing it down. As you can see, I probably need to clean that thing up a little bit, and especially this, you know, get that rust off of there. But anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because I get frequent requests for the blades. I'm actually sold out of those right now. I just sold my last one either yesterday or today. As a matter of fact, I had these new on shelf made in England ones. But if you haven't already heard me say this, or if you haven't read it elsewhere, what a lot of people do is they just take an old saw blade and they just cut it to size, and then they use that. This is not the best representation of that, but it does work. But yeah, if you have the means to cut one, or if you don't, you know, you can find them out there, or talk to somebody, especially one of the saw guys, and have them cut one for you and just cut it to size. And then of course you just put your, you know, whatever your desired angle is on that. And you know, if you think about it, these blades, they're consumables, and so they get used up, especially if the tool is getting used a lot. And so that's why they're so frequently gone, and there are just not enough original blades to go around for every body that's out there. And that's just, you know, that's just reality. And so the other part of this is the older ones like this, and then even some that have this same design right here, the older ones used smaller screws. And so I get requests for these screws fairly often, and they run, you know, usually in that like $8 to $10 range each. So just so you don't get sticker shock when I tell you that. But they were different sizes. And so the older ones are going to have a thinner diameter of screw for both the plate that goes on the back, you know, that holds the blade in place, as well as the tension screw that goes right here that allows you to put tension on the blade at your desired rate or desired tension. And you can see this is one of the later ones, and it's got thicker screws. I don't know why Stanley did. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They knew what they were doing, and they just needed more staying power, or they were shearing, or they were breaking, or whatever. But just know that the later ones have thicker screws. So when you contact me, or wherever you go, you know, for eBay or any of my competitors, when you reach out, you need to know which diameter of screw. And then of course it's always helpful to know thread pitch just in general when you're asking about screws. If it's from a number 80, of course, you know, we're gonna know and we're gonna hook you up. But in a nutshell, that's number 80s, you know, summarized. I'm going to deviate away from hand planes here for just a second, and I'm going to talk about these, what are called perfect handles. You hear that term thrown around a lot, and all it means is that you've got a metal or an iron tool that has wooden handles, and they're inlaid. The wood is inlaid in there. And so a lot of people just refer to these, generally speaking, as perfect handle. Like the most common one I think is probably perfect handle screwdrivers. And these are pretty popular. You know, they're pretty comfortable in the hand. They're good to use, and you know, people just like them. But one thing that I want to point out is that Perfect Handle is an actual brand. So it's kind of like Fritos or Kool-Aid, or you know, just ordering a Coke, or you know, whatever the case is. You know, people just use that term generally speaking. But just know that Perfect Handle is an actual brand. So this is a Perfect Handle, and this is actually a draw knife that I bought off of the Can I Have It auction site. And that is not for sale. I bought that for my personal collection there. And then it's not just screwdrivers and it's not just draw knives. This is actually a Perfect Handle fork. Well, not fork, it's a wrench there. So some type of specific purpose for automotive, for adjusting something where you need to be able to access down in there. I don't know automotive stuff very well, but you can see it's a Perfect Handle, patented. And if you happen to collect the Perfect Handle tools and this is something you're interested in, you know, by all means let me know. A lot of times the wood gets damaged. You know, it's frequent that it'll move a little bit. It'll be, you know, or even start to rot, but a lot of times it'll be dented like that because of course the iron is going to last. The wood, if it's left out in the elements, is going to get I don't know, damaged, is that the right word? But these are made by different companies. So I know Irwin makes a line of these, and as a matter of fact I think they've made some contemporary versions of them. And so, you know, just one more thing for you to know about their, you know, Perfect Handle tools. A lot of times Perfect Handle screwdrivers, and I do have a number of those available if that's something you're interested in. Next up, we're going to talk about miter boxes. We're going to talk about miter box parts specifically, because I have delved into these a little bit. I do sell a few, and if you don't know what you're looking at here, these are stock guides right here, and then these are the little clamps or holders that hold the stock guides down, so you can actually move the stock guides out of the way if you're not using them, and then store them, you know, in the back of the miter box. I didn't drag a miter box down here to show in the video. Maybe I'll do that on a future one. But the reason why I show these is because, you know, it's not uncommon when you buy a parts lot or when you buy a tool such as like a number 45. For whatever reason, the 45s and 55s, those boxes just seem to be a catch-all for spare parts from other tools. And so I just want to show this because it's a stuff you should know thing. When you see these out there, when you see them like in a box, now you'll know what they are. As you can see, these are two different lengths because they go to two different size miter boxes, because the frames, you know, generally speaking, come in two different sizes. So as a matter of fact, this goes to a 3/4 size. This is called a repeater, or some people call it a repeater. But what this does is you can actually, there's two rods that run under a lot of the miter boxes. And so you leave the bottom one attached to one rod, and then you put the other rod up top, and this can actually sit beside the miter box with the rod attached on the bottom and the other rod extended. And so when you're employing the miter box, you just put your stock up against the edge of that rod wherever it's positioned, and then you can make repeated cuts, you know, at the same length. And I know it would be a lot better if I had the miter box to show y'all, but the takeaway here is that's what this is. There's another name for it that's escaping me right now, but I just refer to it as a repeater. And like I said, these are stock guides. These actually go in place like so, and then you can move it into position depending on the width of your stock, and then you can lock it down with the clamp, and it just helps hold the wood in place while you're cutting it with a manual style miter box. If you're not familiar with them at all, you know, Google it, eBay it, look up on YouTube, because they actually show, you know, how the old school miter boxes work, but they're pretty awesome. And when you got a nice sharp saw, you can get a pretty nice cut out of them. Recap, takeaway, these are miter box parts if you happen to see them in the wild. And really part of the reason why I bring that up is because these are worth a few dollars. So if you do see them, they're, you know, if you can pick them up for, you know, $5 or really even $10, I mean, these will sell when they're in really nice condition. They will sell as high as $65, $70 a piece just for this part right here on eBay. And so they're definitely worth picking up because they're so commonly missing from the miter box because somebody took it off and put it in the box with a 45. And so definitely pick them up if you happen to see them out in the wild for the right price. So I've been thinking about doing a separate video and just talk just about lever caps and just cover, you know, a bunch of different types and styles of lever caps through the years. But I just want to bring this up. You can see that the one on the left is a little bit longer. So quiz time, who knows? You know, I can imagine some of y'all going, me, you know, the one on the left is longer. These are actually the same width, so they would both fit on a number 3, or they're just about the same width. And the difference is, yep, it's not going to show on the camera unless I pick it up. So you got the C on the back. So for those of you that already know, you know that that goes to a compass plane or a number 113. You can use a compass plane with a regular number 3 lever cap and it'll do the trick. But again, for best performance, you do want that longer one. This one's been user modified, unfortunately. It's going to be tough to sell that, but when you see that C on the back, another thing you might see is the actual 113 will be etched on the back. And that's another telltale sign, of course, that it's a 113. But I just wanted to bring that up, especially if you're shopping for that part, or if you happen to see one in the wild, or if you got, say, a 113 lever cap installed on a number 3 and you're wondering why it seems a little long or why it's got a C on the back. Now you know, because this is stuff you should know. So more plain stuff. This right here is my user number 5 1/4. And as you can see, it's got a single patent date there. I think I've showed this in another video or two. No raised ring, single patent date. So if you are familiar, and then of course keyhole there. If you're familiar with your type studies, because I haven't gotten this far into the type 13 and 14 yet as of the filming of this video, you know that this is a type 13. I do have a V logo iron on there, because I'm just not that particular. It's kind of an imposter. It hangs out with the type 11s. But this is the first year that Stanley offered the number 5 1/4. So every now and then I'll see something online where somebody talks about finding a type 11 number 5 1/4 or even a type 12, and just know that those don't exist. I mean, Pat Leach talks about it in Blood and Gore that he's seen one example of a 5 1/4 that seemed early or earlier than what they should have been. But the reason why, part of the reason why I want to show this is to notify, or, you know, not notify, to bring up the fact this is the first year that they were offered, which is why it holds a place in my collection, because if there was a type 11, believe me, I would own it. But the other reason is because this little guy is corrugated. And if you want to talk about an uncommon or scarce plane, the 5 1/4 with a corrugated sole, and really, especially a type 13, I mean, these people go googly for these because they are pretty uncommon. I mean, of course, this one's not for sale because it's from my personal collection, but something to look for when you're out and about. If you can find a corrugated number 5 1/4 of any era, you know, definitely pick that up because they're not altogether common. All right, and what would this video be if I didn't at least bring up something bedrock related? I'm going to show you all the cheat code for this, for determining if it's a flat side or a round side frog. So this one right here is for a flat side. Of course, I know that, but, and it has been repaired. If you follow me on Facebook, you know that I've got this one advertised for sale. Mike Muscat was kind enough to repair it for me. But the reason why I'll bring it up, and the reason why I want to show y'all, is because this is how you'll know whether it's a flat side or a round side. Incidentally, these are both for 608s right here. And as I've already told you, this one is for a flat side. This one is for a round side. And you already see the difference there, but this is your telltale sign. This is the easy way to know whether it goes round or flat, is based on the back of it. If it goes straight across, i.e. if it's flat, you know it goes to a flat side. If it's rounded like that, then you know that it goes to a round side. So there you go. You just crack the code, and now when you see a bedrock style frog that's not, you know, on a plane, they're not installed, then you'll know, especially if you're shopping on eBay, because every now and then somebody will have one advertised wrong, and now you'll know and you won't accidentally buy the wrong one. So last and certainly not least, I'm going to talk about this Stanley number 46. So this is one of the combination planes that Stanley offered. Of course, I've talked about Stanley 45s a lot, and I think I mentioned 55s from time to time. But this is a 46, and as you can see, it's got a skewed iron on there, and this one is specifically designed for dado work. And so, and there is a fence that goes along with this that's very similar to the 45. But it's specifically for dado work. You can get these irons in many different sizes, and part of the reason why I show it is, of course, it was like one long advertisement for just plain fun, the parts division. So y'all know some of the parts that I have available. And once again, you know, just let me reiterate, you know, I'm not making any money from these YouTube videos. And so if I don't sell parts, then, you know, I can't afford to keep making these. So parts available for 46s in limited quantities. And one of the things that I wanted to show y'all is this is the depth stop from a 45 or a 55, and this is, to me, arguably the most important depth stop to have. You can use this for just about all the work that you do with a 45 or a 55. This is the depth stop for a 46. I do have two of these available, and you know, I'll be honest, they're a little pricey, but as you can see, they're pretty similar, and they're actually, believe it or not, they are interchangeable. So if you happen to have a 46 and you don't want to spend the money on, you know, that particular depth stop, you can just use this one. It's not going to hurt anything, and you're going to get, you know, virtually the same performance out of it as you would out of the one that's got the rod in the center instead. You know, I've got two of these, and if I'm being honest, I've never actually used a 46 before. I just, you know, if I'm doing dado work, I've got other methods or other things that I can do or use to do that work. But the reason why I say that is because I don't know for sure even which side this goes on. A lot of times I see it installed on this side, and as you can see, they do fit on either side. Ooh, that was a little close there. But they do, you know, install on either side. But the main takeaway is that I do have these available. And as a matter of fact, I also have the screws for the spurs available as well. If you don't have a spur for your 46, ooh, that's going to be, one, it's going to be pretty hard to find, and two, those are going to be pricey. But if you do happen to have the spur but you don't have the screw, then just know that I do have those available. And this thing is not the most friendly, mostly because it's not clean. These rods need to be cleaned and waxed, which is why this thing is giving me fits. But I'm going to take it apart here, and this is going on way too long. So I can show you that screw right there. So that's the screw. It goes in from that side, and then that's the spur right there, the spur or nicker, you might hear it called. And just like on, you know, any other plane that employs those, you want to have that nice and sharp so that you can break the fibers. But I do have those screws available. As a matter of fact, I have very limited quantities of the spurs available. As a matter of fact, somebody just spoke up and claimed one of those today, as a matter of fact. So that's 46 skewed dado plane. Got some parts available, and then the takeaway there was the depth stop. And then also I have a number of those blades or irons for the 46 available as well. Yeah, we got some bonus content here. This Victor Bailey wanted to get in on the action, or Bailey Victor, whatever your preference is. Wanted to get in on the action. This is one of my new favorite planes that I acquired recently. And just as a side note, Will Walker and I actually just started a Bailey group that's really dedicated to Leonard Bailey and his life, his inventions, his planes especially. And so if that's something you're interested in, it is on Facebook. You know, just let one of us know and we can get you hooked up with the link, or just search it out about Leonard Bailey. Because, you know, if you're interested in these planes, I'm going to do another video in the future and talk more about Bailey and about his relationship with Stanley, and then some of his different patents and things like that. But again, this plane just wanted to get in on the action and wanted to be seen. and of course that group, want to plug that. Hopefully I didn't get too long-winded in this video. I know you guys seem to like guys and gals seem to like my last Stuff You Should Know video, and so that's why I wanted to do a volume 2. But as always, you know, thanks for watching. Thanks for encouraging your friends to watch. Thanks for sharing the video, and you know, let's keep driving on. Y'all help me get to 1,000 subscribers, and I really, really appreciate it.